recently I fasted for 40 hours, and it might have completely changed how I see mental clarity, and more importantly, what it takes to get it back. But first of all, we have to understand what is taking it away. A parasite is a foreign entity that, after entering the body, feeds off of it to survive, often going unnoticed for long periods of time. The longer it stays, the worse the effects any living being will experience, and in the most extreme cases of such an invasion, the host will run dry until it dies. Now, for how graphic that start was, I do believe there is a parasite, a metaphorical one, living in all of us, stealing this valuable resource from us. This parasite, opposed to a real-life one, does not feed on your blood, but instead on the mental power you have. And instead of leaving you malnourished, it provokes a feeling you are no doubt familiar with: brain fog. Now, I would say mental clarity is one of the most valuable resources of our time, and it is so not by accident, but because of the demand and of the hunt that social media companies particularly are after for our attention. Algorithms keep getting better, meaning we stay longer on them, interacting for a longer period of time, but the effect this has on us is absolutely tragic. It doesn't take much to see how much more people are getting angrier, unwilling to listen, and overall much more extreme in their beliefs. Now, in some things we have to be extreme and we have to be strong, but not in everything, and much less in the trivialities of daily life. Personally, while I try to control my social media usage and how much I interact, it really had gotten to a point when it was too much. I wasn't thinking straight, too much mental fog, and it even extended to how heavy I felt in my body. And so, because of this, I decided to do the longest fast I've done so far. Something that would, unexpectedly, also starve this mind parasite. Now, the longest fast I had done in the past was for 24 hours. And while the effects were great, I felt lighter, the foods I had after tasted better, and I didn't want as much bad foods. Despite that, it wasn't never anything that transformational. Now, this time, pushing it to 40 hours, the first thing is that it felt very bad, especially getting closer to the second day when I went to sleep. And then waking up, it really felt almost as if I was sick, as if I had a cold. I felt weak, so it wasn't a good experience as far as that goes. But this focus I had, that was just on, I'm hungry, I'm in pain, I want food, I want to eat. As soon as I had that first bite of food, which was a fruit, and by the way, was perhaps the best bite of food I've ever had, what happened after was that all of this focus, this singular focus that was on I'm hungry and I want to eat, after I eat and that disappears, it wasn't replaced by anything, surprisingly. So the voices of the past, of the noise, of the temptations, of wanting shitty food and scrolling and all of this disappeared. And it was silent, it was quiet, it was peaceful. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't temporary. Obviously, it was stronger the closer to this point than it is right now, of course. However, some effects have stayed. And I do believe this is connected to what happens at a cellular level when we fast. In 2016, Yoshinori Osumi won the Nobel Prize in Medicine. And this was due to his research into autophagy, the body's process of eating itself. And it does this to flush out the unnecessary and bad proteins and better restructure the ones it keeps. It is a fascinating process, one that can be observed at the cellular level, that essentially shows that once triggered, autophagy will force cells to turn inward, breaking down and recycling their own damaged components to generate energy and essential building blocks. But the most fascinating thing here is that what triggers this autophagy to begin, so for the mTOR to be inhibited, is essentially a lack of nutrients for a long enough period of time. In other words, fasting. In human beings, it is not certain exactly how long one needs to go without food to trigger this process. However, it is certain that if you go long enough without it, the mTOR will be inhibited, which will essentially take the brakes of autophagy, initiating the process described previously. And just like how the cells remove what is useless and make what is there better, I think the same thing happened here at a mind level. I want to be clear that what I'm about to claim here is not, first of all, any magic trick or any magic pill sort of thing, and it is also not something that I can prove to you through science. So of course, take it with a grain of salt. But what happened to me, going through the fast and really getting to a point where the body was suffering and I was feeling very weak and very depleted and very just wanting that food and not being able to have it, going through it after, it does seem that a similar process that happens in the body when you fast happened in my mind. Because as soon as I stopped it, and again, going back to normal, a lot of the things that were there before were not. The cravings to have some Pizza Hut or some ice cream or some things like that were not. The need to be scrolling all the time and to be distracted, be entertained, obviously it returns a bit, but not to the same level. To an extent, I end up feeling disgusted by some of these things that before I felt like I couldn't live without. And what I think happened here, and again, unable to prove in a scientific sort of way, but what I felt happened was that the body, because it couldn't go to these things, because I also made an effort not to beyond food go to these things, because the body couldn't go and access these things, it was forced to restructure. Now, for how fascinating and life-changing this has to something that I've had in a long, long time, I don't think that what I've seen here and that we're discovering is anything new. And for that, let me take you back 2,000 years. In the Bible, in Matthew 17, after the disciples of Jesus failed to cast out a demon from a man who was epileptic and suffers severely, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water, they brought him and asked for help. Now, after Jesus cast out the demon, the disciples questioned why they couldn't remove this one, to which he replied, "Because of your unbelief. For assuredly, I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting." Now, it was observed here, and it's been observed throughout cultures, religions for thousands of years. And the reason for that is, I do believe, because it works. Now, the biggest problem when it comes to these things, and first of all, believing these things, is that we always think, and we are led to believe, that it cannot be that simple. It can't be as simple as quite literally doing nothing and just suffering through it. It has to be more complex, and I have to, with my mind, craft an intelligent plan full of little details and steps that I have full control over, and if I follow them correctly, and my intellect is proven right, then I will achieve the thing that I want. But I also can put you here and put you in a situation that if I asked you, especially if you're old enough, if you go back, I'm sure back then you didn't have nearly as much mental fog as you have nowadays. Especially if we go back before a smartphone with social media, with an algorithm, was put on your pocket permanently with permanent access to the internet. Back in the day, if you can think about just being in a park with your friends, sometimes you get bored and all these things, it wasn't nearly as bad. So we can observe that back then, even without this intelligent plan and steps and books and whatever that you're thinking about, you were already better, without any of that. So it would be a sort of a logical fallacy to assume that now what we need is to add more on top of the more that we've added. Wouldn't it make more sense that it is about removing things until I get back to the point that I was before? Because for some of us, we already felt it before, much less now with all of this. And the reason for this, and I think that it's so hard for us to accept the simplicity, is because, first of all, the mind wants to have a lot of control. And it wants to know exactly everything, every little detail that is happening. And the second of all, is because it's hard to accept the difficulty. And we think that if we overcomplicate it enough, we can escape it. But some solutions are very simple. And the thing here is that you cannot replace difficulty with complexity. But we are led to believe this, that if I just wait long enough and, plan and research and do these things, that then it gets to this point when, alas, it's now the road is clear before me and I don't have to go through the same struggle as before. But if I tell you, in this specific case, just fast for 2 days or 40 hours like I did, there's no little steps you can do to escape that, because everything you would do for the most part would interfere with what you're doing. And this powerful process that we've seen and that we can observe at a cellular level, I do believe it happens, like I said, at a mind level. But you have to allow it to just happen so that, again, as the body restructures what it has, and just by being left alone it can solve a lot of problems, I do believe the same is true for your mind. If you go through this, and it is painful and annoying, you'll feel hungry, you feel tired, you have a lot of justifications why to stop it. Maybe you have a task you need to complete and you feel like you can't do it like this. Maybe you have some sport coming up. There will always be, no matter how much you plan for it in advance, a lot of reasons and excuses to stop it. Even if it's just a pain in your stomach and you just are walking and then you look at some KFC ad, that can be enough. And I do believe what you'll find here, if you allow the body and the mind to do what they can, if you just leave them be, is that for the first time in a long while, as you go through it and then as you break the fast and you see what happens, you will, perhaps for the first time in a long while, feel like yourself again. Because if I asked you, when was the last time you spent even 24 hours without eating anything, no calories, you would tell me, if you never thought about this, probably never. So, if you've been growing more and more with mental fog, with your brain not working as it should, with your thinking not being as clear as you should, as you believe it should be, give this a try. At the worst, you'll be very hungry and then you stop being hungry and you lose a little weight. At the best, you may just change everything without doing anything.